We've been going over a topic regarding character traits, building the character. So it's natural to go over some character flaws. Last week we went over a natural character flaw, which was backbiting. We mentioned references from the Quran. We mentioned references from the Seerah, from the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. After all, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was shown the punishment of backbiters in his ultimate journey in the Mi'raj. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was shown the punishment of backbiters, that they were ripping apart their faces and their own chest, which was natural because in the world the equivalent of backbiting is consuming the flesh of your dead brother. So it's just natural that in the hereafter one will be tearing apart and ripping apart their own body and their own flesh. So continuing with these character flaws, because if we can learn from these, inshallah, we can improve. And again, we're not pointing fingers at anyone, rather our own selves. How can I improve myself? One major character flaw is being double-faced, two-faced. The hadith goes in narration by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He narrates that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Min sharri an-nas dhul wajhayn, alladhi ya'ti ha'ula'i biwajhin wa ha'ula'i biwajhin." Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that one of the worst people is one who has two faces, two sides. They approach one group of people with one face, and they approach another group of people with a totally different face, meaning their demeanor, how they carry themselves, how they interact, what type of speech, what type of news they're carrying. Many things go into this warning. And the next narration will give a little more detail. That narration is narrated by Ammar radiallahu anhu. He narrates that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Man kana lahu wajhan fi dunya kana lahu yawm al-qiyamati lisanan min nar." Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that whoever is two-faced in this world, they will have two tongues in the hereafter, and those two tongues will be made from the fire. So these narrations are ultimately referencing hypocrites. Hypocrites, of course, they harbor a two-faced approach. Hypocrites during the time of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the way they presented themselves as believers to a group of people, and as disbelievers to a totally different group. So the nifaq of faith, of iman, is a major character flaw. Now during the time of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it was a very unique situation where Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam knew each and every single hypocrite. Each and every single one were known by Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Not only did he know the names and who each and every single hypocrite was, but Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam shared it, at least is known from one narration in the Seerah, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam shared the names of those hypocrites with Sahib al-Sir from amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, Sayyidina Hudayfa radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Hudayfa radiallahu anhu was the keeper of secrets of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's a very unique situation because one verse mentions regarding Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We have to appreciate that Ya ayyuha Rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's responsibility was to convey every single thing that was revealed on him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the unique responsibility of that is that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam did that to the best of his capability, and we stand witness to that. His generation stood witness to that. Now, something as confidential as the list of hypocrites, it's something very unique. Do you broadcast that similar to how the wahi was to be conveyed to the masses? So even Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam informing one person, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam completed that responsibility of conveying. So the list of hypocrites was not something to broadcast to the masses. Similar to the wahi, how Quran, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's responsibility was to inform every single person he came in contact with, or at least give the message so that the message can be carried onwards. So this is that very unique situation in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam fulfilled his responsibility of conveying. The verse goes, يَا أَيُّهَا الرَّسُولُ بَلِّغْ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ وَإِنْ لَمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. So we need to appreciate that verse in its context, and it's directly dealing with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the obligation that was placed on the shoulders of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So going back to this, if the list of hypocrites was known to a select few in the generation of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it's even more sensitive in our generation. It's much more sensitive in our generation because, of course, we never point the finger or we never label anyone else as a hypocrite. Because ultimately a person's heart and their tongue and how they carry themselves, the details of those things are known exclusively by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are not to label anyone as a munafiq or a hypocrite, someone with two faces, someone with two tongues. So the only way we can apply these verses and these ahadith are to our own selves. That where do I stand in this line? Certainly we hope that we don't fall within the category of a munafiq. So the next verses and the next ahadith also assist in the magnitude of the seriousness of these ahadith is, of course, telling lies. And telling lies to a person who trusts you. The narration is that the narrator heard Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, كبرت خيانة أن تحدث أخاك حديثا هو لك به مصدق وأنت له به كاذب. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that it's a great treachery when you tell something to your brother who trusts you while you are lying to him. Basically, the individual you are giving the message or the information to, that brother knows you as a truthful person, but you are a liar to him. You are feeding him a lie. The gravity of sin increases according to circumstances. Of course, lying in general is a major sin, but the gravity of that sin increases according to the circumstance and the context. While telling a lie is always bad, it's worse. The lie is worse when you are telling an innocent person who, again, trusts you. So the circumstance sort of aggravated the sin. And the best example that I can immediately think of is, as parents, at times we might lie to our own children just to get them to be quiet. The child is looking at the parent and absolutely trusting them have confidence in them, but the parent is lying to the child. And there can be many more examples, but that immediately comes to mind. And we can all relate to that example. And finally, one more hadith on this topic of lying, and it goes hand in hand with a person who has two faces and two tongues, and a category of nifaq. عن صفوان بن سليم أنه قيل للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أيكون المؤمن جبانا؟ قال نعم. فقيل له أيكون المؤمن بخيلا؟ قال نعم. قال فقيل له أيكون المؤمن كذابا؟ فقال لا. The narration goes that the narrator, he inquired from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is it possible for a believer to be a coward? Can a believer be a coward? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded that yes. The next question is that is it possible for a believer to be stingy? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded that yes, it's possible for a believer to be stingy. And finally, the narrator inquired that is it possible for a believer to be a habitual liar? And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded that no, it's not possible for a believer to be a habitual liar. So the first two questions, a believer being a coward or a believer being stingy, these are moral deficiencies, and they are at least conceivable. It's at least believable that these character flaws might exist within a believer. These are, after all, human weaknesses, being stingy, being a coward. But being a habitual liar, it's an entirely different category. Being a habitual liar, a repeat offender, it is so far off the chart. Being a habitual liar, it's so incompatible with Iman that a habitual liar not only has this bad trait of lying, but other immoral traits also begin to culminate within that person. Immoral traits, corruption, hiding, concealing. In order to cover up one lie, a person has to just naturally come up with 10 more lies. To cover those 10 lies, you have to make up 20 more lies. So it's a continuous trend. And there is no hope for a habitual liar of any remedy except that they give up lying. When we know the term cold turkey. Cold turkey is, for example, a smoker, when they just give up without warning. Or even a person who might be trying to give up, for example, caffeine, coffee, or other bad habits that they might be trying to recover from. The only way to remedy and to correct habitual lying and repeat lying is to give up cold turkey. That is the only way. And finally, in conclusion, we know the very famous hadith is that a person will continue telling the truth until a person in the sight of Allah, that person will be from amongst the Siddiqeen. And the Siddiqeen are very near to the prophets. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst that category. And a person will continue lying until that person is written and is considered before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as from amongst the liars. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being amongst that category. Wa akhir da'wana.